So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I'm quite pleased to have been invited to speak to you here today and to meet again my good friend Jose, talking again and complementing hopefully what he said on a topic that is at our very heart in the insurance area. But before doing so, I was provoked when Professor Guttard, which was very difficult to speak after you, but to got in the middle of his speech, he got a connect to the insurance and pension area. And I think, so I'm not only listening because I'm very interested in the subject. When this bail-in discussion came up in the financial stability reports some years ago, with a feeling now we have found really a solution that is much, much better than others. I like that we are more critical on that, because also, what are we thinking? And let me spend a few words on that, because I think it very well describes the highly interconnected world in which we live. If we assume that there will be a high need for capitalization with bail-in instruments, then the question, of course, is who will buy that? And as Professor Guttard mentioned, insurance and pension funds are at the top of the potential investors in that. And now let's look to what happened just a few months ago. We entered in a new system, which is on the one hand more risk-based, that's fine, so there should be good risk management in the companies, they should be aware of what type of risk they are taking if they invest in such bail-in instruments. But at the same time, let's not forget we have a very low or zero interest rate environment. We have a situation where companies, at least some of them, might be tempted to search for yield. Might be they get interested in just because they want to fulfill their liabilities they have on their books. And that came from a time when interest rates were significantly different from that. From a time when we, like in my country, considered 10, 15 years ago, we were blamed for saying 3% calculated interest rate is enough. I do not want to quote what people said to me. When we were convinced that we were on the safe side with that. So times have changed, and now a lot of companies have it on their books. As Jose mentioned, we have, of course, these transition periods, but in fact, from an economic perspective, that might not help so much the companies that now need to really make sure that they fulfill their promises over the next few years and keep the trust of consumers in that. We also have the so-called prudent person principle. In many countries, like in my own, we had very strict, relatively strict investment regulation that would at least have avoided some concentration in some of those assets. So since 1st January, there is much more freedom in doing the investments. We have what is left is more this type of more qualitative requirements. And we see a move for some companies to other business models. So some of them found out that what we call the traditional life insurance products become very expensive under the new regime. In some cases, I was wondering why they haven't detected that earlier. And now moving to kind of index or unit-linked type of business. And there again, we have something which I came across after the 2008 outbreak of the crisis. After some time, you get instruments that are no longer bought by retail customers directly from banks or investment firms, but they are bought from institutional investors like insurance companies and might then be packaged into this type of products. With all the legal risks involved in all that stuff we have seen. So I just wanted to say that even the topic of bail-in versus bail-out for banks is very much at our agenda as well, and it demonstrates in a very good way on how those interactions work, and it might also lead, of course, to a higher to even make the interconnectedness between the insurance and banking sector even higher. Also, we have quite a high level already in Europe. Today, ladies and gentlemen, I want to abstract now from my home experience. I want to look at it. We have heard Jose speaking about the first experience here in Portugal, and I want to look at it from a European perspective. So I speak more on behalf of IOPA, and I have the pleasure to be the alternate chair of IOPA for 1.5 years now. So what is going on with insurance supervision? 2016-13 certainly is for us a historical date, because it has taken, as usual, much longer, but I would say much, much longer than expected. And sometime in between, I was no longer so sure whether we will really successfully end up at the ultimate goal, which was mainly due to the fact that it coincided with the financial crisis and all the consequences. And I want to make a point here. Let's always be fair and distinguish between the consequences of Solvency II implementation and the issue of financial crisis, because that is not the same. Solvency II might be showing things more clearly, but Solvency II cannot be blamed for all that is, all the difficulties we have in the insurance sector and pension sector right now. So we are happy that after nearly 1.5 decades, it finally came to a success. And we have this new risk-based supervisory regime here, and we all now live in this new environment. We still live in the transitional environment because, you know, starting a new regime also always means that the information you get is still from the old regime, but you should take the measures based on the new regime. So there is a kind of trade-off on that, and we have seen a lot of problems in adjusting to that. But now we have, and EIOPA was involved in the policy process, in setting up regulation. Nobody has complained it's too little. In issuing guidelines, opinions, and particularly also in responding to calls for advice by the European Commission on their legal field, which is basically the regulatory and implementing technical standards. After this is now in place, some of that last minute, we see now moving EIOPA into a kind of new mission, and that is to work for supervisory convergence across the European Union. And the question is, why is this convergence so important? It is because it's three fundamental objectives that we want to achieve with that. Firstly, we want to ensure that European Union regulation is applied in all member states. We have even seen delays in Solvency II implementation in a regulatory perspective. Secondly, to guarantee a level playing field and prevent regulatory arbitrage in the internal market. And thirdly, to safeguard a similar level of protection of all policyholders and beneficiaries across the European Union. And this is a really huge task. This is a really huge task. But it is the more important as we have the first time a maximum harmonized system. All the old directives have been a minimum harmonization to a large extent, and now we have maximum harmonization. So the goal is to have comparable, consistent application also in practice. The starting point, of course, I think Jose mentioned it already, is very diverse systems and practices there, and some supervisors still want to not give up their old practices and continue with that even under the new regime. I think that won't work. So we clearly, at the last strategic day, I come to that, back to that of EIOPA. We have a clear commitment to say, look, we need, all of us need to think how we implement the new one, the new regulation, the new framework, and not thinking how can our tools survive the 1st January 2016 and the time ahead. So all in all, I'm confident that we will achieve progress, but I'm also realistic enough to say consistency is a long-term goal. What are now these tools and actions that we use in order to achieve this outcome? EIOPA is building a comprehensive information system based on the data collected on the new harmonized Solvency II reporting templates. The first time ever we have comparable figures because they are based on the same regime, on the same valuation principles, on the same structure. This is quite new one. At the beginning there was some hesitation or reluctance even to think about sending data to a kind of centralized system. It took some time to overcome those issues. But now those reporting templates provide EIOPA with a set of data in good quality and hopefully further improving quality. And so EIOPA is going to further develop the capacity to provide reliable risk analysis and early warning indicators, both on individual and group level. So this is kind of getting the benefit from sharing the data is to get more feedback and reliable performance indicators, which is even more important because let's not forget Solvency II is a very individualized system. So in small markets it's very difficult to do peer comparison anymore because you have companies with internal models, life and non-life are very different, even more than in the past. So there are more individual choices. So it makes it more difficult to compare. So if you can use now a cross-European comparison level with peer groups, that is certainly very helpful. Improve and work further peer group comparisons and increasing also the supervisory capabilities through that. So both the quality of both micro and macro supervision in the European Union should be reinforced through these steps. Another important step is the development of a supervisory handbook. Some people ask, why do we need another layer? So we already have 4. So do we add a kind of 5th layer? I think it's important because this is, so to speak, really at the heart of what supervisors are doing. And that is more a kind of clear basis for their way they supervise. This is nothing that has to do directly with some kind of regulating market or supervising markets. That's more really what can you do and to share our practical tools that we apply. I think that's very, very useful without setting another benchmark. So we will not assess each other against this handbook. This should just be the instrument to be compliant with the guidelines and the regulations. The handbook covers areas like risk assessment, how to supervise board responsibilities in the governance system. What is quite important, the business model analysis. Jose referred to it. So for some companies, Solvency II clearly raises the need of changing their business model, of creating more sustainable business models. The supervision of the technical provisions, the prudent person principles, that is very new to us, where we have no more quantitative limits, which were used to some of us in the past very much. So we need much, much more to work on a qualitative basis and the monitoring of internal models. EIOPA strongly encourages the supervisors, the national competent authority, to use that. And a first version, 1.0, should be ready in the course of this year. EIOPA is also publishing on a monthly basis the risk-free interest rate term structures. That is, of course, always something which we look at because they have a certain trend over the last years, and it is basically mainly in one direction, getting lower and lower, which means that we have to be aware that companies might trigger the recalculation of their technical provisions or other supervisory measures. And the use of these discount rates on a European basis, they are of course published by the European Union on a quarterly basis, but calculated by EIOPA on a monthly basis, lead to a clearly more consistent calculation of the liabilities throughout Europe. And we devote a special attention to the ongoing monitoring of internal models, an area where material differences can have a huge impact in the level playing field and policyholder protection. We are of course aware of all the discussion going on internal models that would deserve another full day discussion, I think. For the moment, since those are allowed, we try really to, because it's even more fundamental to make sure that convergence is a driving factor. We have seen differences that can be up to 30–40% in capital requirements, depending on the use of the internal model. And also the internal model not just being a calculating mechanism, but also being integrated in the governance structure and of the companies. So EIOPA issued opinions covering risks to be how to deal with the risk particularly in the internal models, and so we have talked about the development and testing of sound ongoing appropriateness indicators and benchmarking for internal models. This is quite close to a contradiction to say you want to have something you can compare where you say it's an internal model because you cannot compare it. That's a huge challenge. On the other hand, we need to make sure that the different risks are treated in a kind of consistent manner, and there is no not internal models getting to what is not intended, that is capital optimization tools, but really remain what they are, because the standard formula is hugely complicated and does not reflect the reality of some of the companies in a proper way. So to make sure that on the one hand the risk sensitivity is taken into account and is allowed to really be taken into account in a large amount and not to have a race to the bottom. EIOPA has done much more towards the supervisory convergence over the past 2 years. So we have delivered a lot of input to technical standards for the European Commission. I think a very important step forward was when we were desiring the entry into force of Solvency II, I do that for many, many years now, was when we came at these negotiations on the called Omnibus II with all these long-term guarantees measures and adjustments to make it less procyclical and to allow for more taking into account the long-term nature of some of the liabilities as compared to the volatility of market fluctuations. And there was a time when we went under pressure. We came under pressure. Supervisors came under pressure when the IMF was doing the EFSA programs and said, look, what you do is outdated. And we say we wait for Solvency II. And then it was clear we need to do something. On the other hand, if we do something and we have no clear benchmark, there is a danger that we go in different directions. That makes convergence afterwards even more difficult. So EIOPA issued, and I think this was a very, very good step forward, in 2014 already kind of guidelines in the governance area that gave those who wanted to act early, those jurisdictions who wanted to give early, a clear structure, a clear goal in which direction we are expected to go. And afterwards makes it easier not to have this huge problem of having gone to the wrong direction. That means you have to go back first, then you are where you have been, and then you converge towards where you should converge. We have, the EIOPA has created an oversight team. I think that's an important part. Besides the so-called peer reviews, as you all know, the oversight team visits the national supervisors and gives them independent and challenging feedback on the supervisory practices. In order to understand where to converge, we need to understand where we start from. And to get a clear view, we have also now found that we should pay more attention to the outcome of those oversight visits and these investigations in order to get more fruit for the way to reach convergence. The other oversight experts have now conducted about 35 bilateral visits to the NCAs, and they led to improvement, and in general they are now accepted. In the beginning it was a little strange and not so common, but now they have been accepted. It led to some major steps in some countries. I just want to mention the asset quality review process in Romania, and another one is going on in Bulgaria. So that really adds to the trust, credibility, and consumer trust, confidence in the insurance sector of the respective countries. We are also performing the peer reviews I've already mentioned. Solvency II is in place now. It is fully applicable since the 1st of January this year. But already now the first work starts, and it was one of the last slides of José, on looking into the so-called Solvency II review. We want to have a kind of period of stability of the regulatory framework. We all face huge challenges because all our supervisory practices have, in the new areas, have to be fully new developed. And we have all the time, you know, I like to discuss sometimes this so-called contradiction between the principle-based and rule-based type of systems. all those, in my country at least, or in my scope of attention, they said, yeah, this is good to have principle-based, of course. And then the full desire, they came and say, what does it mean for me? I need to take this decision. I want to know now whether this is an outsourcing arrangement or not, because I need to, so this back and forth, I mean, it was not so helpful that part of this level 2 legislation came in force relatively late, and was, some of the parts were quite unstable until the very end. So that was not helpful, but I'm really, I hope for those days when we will have not so many questions that are unanswered. And you know, the difficulty we have is we have now the first time in Europe, in the insurance sector, we have directly applicable European legislation. That hasn't been the case before. Before we used directives, and now we have a huge bulk we have in the so-called delegated act, so in the Commission regulation, which is directly applicable, and therefore also not up to a kind of national interpretation. We need to be very careful in order not to tell companies, this is our view, but might be this is not the right one, and they do some investments which turn out not to be successful. We start already as part of the regulatory mandate. We will want to ensure that we have a rigorous, evidence-based and transparent review of Solvency II. To be quite honest, some of those final negotiations were mainly under the heading, let's just close it and let's make it live and real and not keeping a theory. I didn't like to go to our US friends anymore, because they always said it's untested, it's not yet in place. Why do we talk about Solvency II? Nobody knows what it means in practice. So it was good to make it, but certainly it is far from perfect, and we need to take the review quite serious, which is why we start with that right now. And we certainly some principles, at least two principles, the simplicity and proportionality principles are some that will certainly influence this process. We will particularly also look into investment behavior of insurers based on the new freedom under the prudent person principles, and assess the consequences of the implementation of the long-term guarantee measures. This needs to be done on an annual basis until 2020. I think that this is one of the main elements of making successfully managing the transition from Solvency I to Solvency II with the high stock of guaranteed life insurance products for some of the companies. In 2018, we then need to revisit the calibration of different asset classes. We also look into the discussion that is going on sovereign bonds, but that is clearly a quite of fully cross-sector issue, where the only fear of insurance is that insurance is not part of the story, because otherwise we will end up in huge arbitrage issues. I firmly believe that. The recent financial crisis certainly has shown that we might reconsider sovereign bonds. In the internal models, we need to make sure that it is kind of a zero start and no cherry picking on saying, I take kind of standard formula, put that in the internal model where I like it, and then I put other things there, which, so I need then to start from scratch and have a full economic view on risks. Possible comprehensive process will include certainly the impact assessment and the see probable unintended consequences that have been that can be observed in certain countries. Another element on the international front is, as you know, we have a different situation as compared to the banking sector, that Solvency II is ahead of the global developments, whereas so we do not speak about kind of how much we take into the European legislation. For the insurance side, it's more how can we defend Solvency II, at least in its core, in its core elements, against international standards. It turns out to be quite difficult, but still the IIS is working on a new momentum to get insurance capital standards done, international insurance capital standards, partly also driven through the Financial Stability Board, and we'll see where where we will get with that. From a supervisor's perspective, from European supervisor perspective, we always say very clearly, unlike others, we say we are prepared to do some changes, but we want to preserve the main elements because we believe that the whole system is far from perfect and we need to work on it, but the fundamental principles we believe are right. We think we need to have a clear view on risks. We need to see even volatile developments, but then we have to deal with it, rather than to hide it and find a system where in the valuation we just evaluate in a way that we are not transparent, do not understand what is going on. So we need to work on understanding things and then having the right results. That brings me to the conclusion. I would like to remember that the IOPA works in the environment of the European system of financial supervision. We have a lot of initiatives that become cross-border, cross-sector, and we need to make sure that we understand the interaction, the potential arbitrage, and as I put at the beginning on the bail-in example, there are many more to take, even more complicated ones, to see how is this interaction taking place. And then find good solutions and always think about there are a lot of unintended consequences. Consequences you can avoid. Professor Goodhart very clearly said, let's be aware of the consequences of introducing the bail-in. There are problems with that. We should be aware of that. And then there's a political decision or a decision of going for it or not. I say, look, we see some of the risks also for the insurance and pension sectors. Let's just be aware of it and not think we have solved the issue here and we get a much, much bigger issue on the somewhere else. So we want to ensure strong but fair supervision. We want to base ourselves on, keep based on the forward-looking approach to risks, take account that it's better to prevent than repair, prioritize dialogue with market participants, better understand the business models. Quite important to us. We have never looked so much and so closely into the business model and the future business strategies than now, and promote the early enough awareness, supervisory action to protect the policyholders and mitigate possible disruptions in the market. I told you that there's a lot ahead for us to do. We have accomplished a lot and we are happy that we have, but now we are going to work further and we understand we are working for the protection of the consumers and we are not working in isolation. Thank you very much.